How's it going guys, Chris here, and today we're going to be checking out all the different enemy types that first appear in Chapter 1 of Black Myth Wukong. So at the beginning of your journey, you'll be spending a lot of time navigating around forested areas, which are predominantly patrolled by wolf-type enemies that come in the form of several different variants. The most common types you'll find though are the blade-wielding scout and swordsworn variants, which sort of act like your average bog-standard vanilla enemies, there to try and get in your way, and then probably regret doing so not too long after. These guys are pretty much everywhere in the forest, sometimes hanging around in small groups. But despite their determination to put a halt to your journey, they're not really going to cause you too many problems. They might tickle your health bar a little bit, softening you up for other enemies, but their attacks are generally pretty weak and fairly predictable. Just whack them in the face a few times, and they'll wish they never started the fight in the first place. Another pretty stubborn wolf variant, who's brave and stupid enough to take you on, is the soldier, who might sound a bit more combat ready than the other guys, but basically just acts like the other guys, though he's fortunate enough to be given a small shield. But unfortunately for the soldier, that puny ass shield doesn't really do very much. It's practically useless at blocking damage from your strikes, so the wolves tend to use it for slapping you around instead. It generally acts as a secondary weapon for the soldier, to complement their sword in combat. Not that they'll get very much chance to use it, that is, as they'll be lying face down in the dirt before they know it. You should be able to wipe the floor with these guys, but one variant you'll need to be a tad more vigilant around is the Stalwart, a heavy axe wielding wolf warrior who's adopted the typical slow but powerful combat style instead. The Stalwart kind of acts like a classic brute variant, waving that beefy axe around to deliver strong blows with its heavy momentum. Though as you probably expect, many of these attacks can be fuzzy a mile away, having long wind-up times, giving you plenty of time to get the hell out of there. These variants can still make a dent in your health if you're not careful though, sometimes charging forwards unexpectedly to catch you off guard. They can also withstand more whacks from your stick, so expect them to put up more of a fight than some of the other wolves. But a much weaker, more annoying variant comes in the form of the archer, who, as you'd probably expect, is a ranged enemy who fires a load of arrows, dishing out the pain in a cowardly but probably wiser way. These arrows fortunately don't follow real life physics, travelling through the air slower than they naturally would, giving you a bit more time to step out of the way, with those projectiles being fairly easy to read and dodge. Well, up until the archer decides to rapid fire a bunch of arrows in quick succession, that is. But thankfully, you'll be able to spin your staff around, destroying those arrows as they fly towards you, letting you advance through the area without getting shot to pieces. The archers are stationary enemies in fixed positions, unable to run away when they see you coming, probably wishing their feet weren't super glued to the floor. But in situations with multiple opponents, they can still be a bit of a pain in the arse. Wolf Sentinels, on the other hand, are much more gung-ho, choosing to rush headfirst into a fight with their long axes, baggy garments, and impressively white hair. These guys tend to act in a similar way to the other melee-focused enemies, though being a tad more nimble, while chaining several different strikes together using dash attacks, slashes, and powerful slams. Getting caught out in one of their long-winded combos can knock out pretty hefty chunks of health if you're not careful. And with the Sentinels being a bit smarter and quicker than some of the other wolves, they're sure to test your reaction times a bit more, sometimes baiting you to come on over and attack, only for them to quickly lash out unexpectedly, to trap you in one of their flurries. But the award for the most aggressive wolf surely has to go to the assassin variant, armed with a double-bladed staff and the ability to leap around while performing fancy spinning moves through the air. If Darth Maul was a furry, he'd probably be this guy. Having all this extra agility not only allows the assassin to gain ground on you quickly, but it also lets him retreat from danger too, especially handy for diving in and out of combat, preventing you from getting too carried away with your staff up close. Wolf assassins can soak up more damage than normal, probably due to all the serious gains they've collected while training, even having a few sneaky little tricks up their sleeves too, being able to launch their weapon through the air with it acting like a giant razor-sharp boomerang of doom. Not an enemy to be taken too lightly. So that's the wolf pack out of the way, but there's still plenty of other forest critters for us to smack around, with the next one being an angry frog creature, appropriately being named Croaky. Now Croaky might look a bit silly on the face of it, but he's actually a murderous bugger who's hell-bent on butchering you with his massive dagger, being less like Kermit the Frog and more like Jason Voorhees. Just like those wolf assassins that we checked out a minute ago, Croakies can also jump around and perform acrobatic maneuvers, which, combined with their attacks and general movement, makes them slippery enemies to deal with. You need to fight the creature while avoiding getting sliced to ribbons, and when Croaky finally croaks, he's going to casually explode into a pile of chunks and toxic gas. As you do. Next up is the Crow Diviner, basically a lanky fortune-telling bird guy who also happens to be skilled in martial arts, using both a sword and incense bowl in combination with some high-flying kicks. These enemies are tougher than your average sword-swinging wolf, always eager to jump in for a good scrap. Not exactly the deadliest opponent you'll come up against, but still one that can beat you up nevertheless, having a variety of different ways to deal damage. This forces you to stay on your toes and prepare to jump out of the way of their combos, throwing a few curveballs into the mix from dashing strikes, stomp attacks, and the occasional reverse swipe with their incense pole, which can easily catch you off guard as they jump backwards. Most of the enemies you'll run into during Chapter 1 can be dealt with without too much hassle, but the Bandit Chief is one that's sure to test you a bit more, essentially being a big bald bloke with a huge serrated sword. Don't get fooled into thinking that he's going to act like the wolf Stalwarts, as although he might look like the slow dopey type, this dude is surprisingly fast for his size, able to chain a bunch of heavy swipes and slams together in quick succession. Getting hit by that sword can be as punishing as it looks, so you'll need to be a bit smarter about your timing, striking at the right moments to chip away at that beefy health pool, while knowing when to retreat to avoid getting hacked to bits. My advice? Respect the Bandit Chief's power, and don't get too ballsy. Going back to the animal bad guys now, with easily one of the more sinister looking enemies you'll come up against. Basically a king cobra who's sprouted limbs, grown a mop head, and woke up on the wrong side of the bed. The snake patroller is just about as evil as it looks, running around the place while brandishing a long speared weapon, attempting to whack you around with it using aggressive combos and charges, some of which can be tricky to dodge. But one of the main things you'll need to watch out for is the enemy's lunging bite attack, which the patroller indicates by rearing upwards first, only to launch itself forward and chomp down on you. You really don't want to get bitten by this thing, as it'll not only wipe away a decent chunk of health, but it'll also poison you too, with the toxins slowly eroding your health bar down even further. This effect will eventually go away on its own, if you don't have any medicines to cure it instantly, but not until it's wreaked havoc on your health first, complicating the fight and forcing you to waste those precious healing gourd uses. Next up is the Skeletal Snake, which is basically the spooky variant. These guys look a little bit like the last enemy, if the last enemy was left to rot in a graveyard for a while first, essentially being reanimated serpent-like skeletons that magically reassemble as you wander on by. Unlike the last variant though, these ones are a lot slower and weaker, also not having any kind of weapons to attack you with, swiping at you with their claws instead, while biting you as they jump forwards. Thankfully you don't need to worry about getting yourself poisoned, with the creature having no venom glands, though they will sometimes attempt to surround you, making up for their lack of individual strength. A few whacks from your melee staff should be enough to send them back to the dirt, but do be aware of them randomly rising up from the undergrowth as you pass through areas, which just might give you an unexpected surprise. Sometimes as you go around foraging the local plant life for your own personal gain, some of those plants will actually choose to fight back, with one of those being the Fungiling, who assumes the role of a mushroom, clambering out from the soil as you attempt to yank its head from out of the ground. This creature is surprisingly tall and ripped for a thing that sits around in the dirt all day, and it's also armed with a massive deadly scythe too, which can be swung around to deliver some pretty gnarly blows. The Fungiling also has the ability to float away from danger, using a weird veil-like thing, and it can definitely be a tricky fight if you're not expecting or ready for it. But the Fungiling isn't on his own here, as there's also another swole plant-based beast that wants to take you on in a fight too. The Ginsengling will climb out from under the ground looking for a scrap if you disturb it from its slumber. And aside from having those dainty little flowers on its head, it's a pretty monstrous thing with a tough physique, despite looking like it almost certainly skips leg day. This thing might be unarmed, but it's still a very dangerous threat to take on, especially if it catches you out while you're low on health, grabbing you with its outstretched arms and clumsily waving them around to give you a good slap up close. The Ginsengling will also sometimes plant its arms into the floor, causing a load of roots to emerge from underneath the creature, which spread out around the area nearby to slow your movements, obviously something you'll want to stay away from. As you defeat either the Fungiling or Ginsengling, you'll harvest extra plants from their downed bodies, so although you might be thrown into a fight that you didn't ask for, at least you'll get more rewards for beating them in the end. So those are all the standard enemies that first appear in Chapter 1 of Black Myth Wukong. Subscribe and stay tuned if you want to see more guides on other enemies and bosses in different chapters of the game, and hit that like button on your way out if you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching guys, have a good day, and I'll be seeing you in the next one.